Okay, so in this video, we're going to be talking about change blindness. And change blindness is something that comes up a lot in cognitive psychology, especially when people are trying to test memory. So when we talk about memory, we mostly focus on the short-term and long-term forms of memory, but that's not the whole story. We also have sensory memory, and you can kind of think of this as a short-term memory. So to illustrate the sensory store, let's do a quick task. Here are the instructions. You are going to see two images, and they are identical, almost. They are different in one significant way. Try to find the change. Get ready. 3, 2, 1. Alright, did you spot the change? If you didn't, don't worry. Most people find this actually really difficult. The 1-second visual mask that you saw, that interferes with everything in your visual sensory store. That's also called your iconic memory. Let's try this one more time, but this time, let's use a 100 millisecond visual mask. Alright, get ready. Here we go. Okay, so did you notice the shadow? The shadow of the tree is what changed that time. That should have been much easier than the first time we tried this. That 1/10 of a second delay is short enough so that you've retained nearly everything in your visual sensory store, so that whenever you look at those two images, it's really easy to compare, to find the difference between those two images. And what you've just done is called a flicker task. It's used a lot in cognitive psychology. When people fail to see the change between those pictures, that's called change blindness. Now, let's look at a couple more examples. This time, we're going to manipulate the mask between the images, because the shorter that visual mask is, the less change blindness you should see. So let's start out with a 100 millisecond mask. So have you noticed the change yet? If you haven't, don't really strain your eyes, just kind of look at the full picture, and it may pop out at you. Do you notice the colors on the girl's shirt? Okay, so that should have been a much easier example than the first one that we tried, because we were using a very short mask. That was only 100 milliseconds, or 1/10 of a second. Now, let's try one more, this time without any mask. Okay, so this one should be the easiest of them all. In case you don't see it, just check the top of the astronaut's head. Now, why is this so much easier than the first few that we tried? Because this time we don't have a visual mask. In other words, we don't have anything to disrupt our sensory memory. So we're directly able to compare the memory for one picture for the next picture. And the difference between those two pictures pops out right at us. So if we have less change blindness, the shorter that visual mask goes, then the opposite should be true, right? If we increase the visual mask, then we should experience more change blindness. To put it another way, it should be harder to detect the change. So let's do that. Let's pull up one more example. This time, we'll use a mask of 1 whole second. That's twice what we've been doing so far. So get ready, here it comes. Alright, so this should be considerably harder than all of the other ones that you've done so far. Now the weird thing about this is that I actually expanded the total play time. So, for example, the other ones that you looked at, you only got to see the pictures for about 1.5 seconds. This time you get to see this picture 2.5 seconds at a time, and yet that mask, which is a whole second long, makes this really, really difficult. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move that mask down to 100 milliseconds again. So we're going to move it back down to 1/10 of a second, and then we'll see how well you do. So remember, don't necessarily scan across the picture, just let your eyes wander, just gaze upon the picture, And with the short mask time, it may pop out at you. If it hasn't yet, that's okay. This is a little bit of a tricky one. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get rid of the mask completely. And that should eliminate any kind of effects of change blindness that we see, because we'll be able to directly compare one visual image with the other visual image that's held in our sensory memory. Yeah, and now it pops out at you, right? So now we don't have any change blindness any longer because we're able to directly compare those two images held in our sensory memory. So, why does this actually happen? It's because iconic memory allows us to perceive the world as a fluid experience. It's not fragmented. So in that way, this is a good thing. These very small changes in our environment, like what you saw in these pictures, are rarely that important, and so we have a habit of missing them. So let me give you two more examples, and both of these are going to be video clips. Just watch them and see if you can spot any kind of change, just like you did in the flicker task that we just did. All right, here we go.
Hey! Forrest! How you doing? Come in, come in.
I got your letter.
Oh, I was wondering about that.
Is this your house?
Yeah, it's messy right now. I just got off work.
It's nice. You got air conditioning.
Thank you.
I ate some.
Hey, I kept a scrapbook of your clippings and everything. There you are. This, I got you running.
I ran a long way. For a long time.
There. Listen, Forrest, I don't know how to say this. I want to apologize for anything that I ever did to you, because I was messed up for a long time, and... Yoo-hoo! Hey! Hi! Hey, you! This is my old friend from Alabama. How'd you do?
Okay, so did you see the change? If you didn't, that's okay. It was kind of an innocuous change. It wasn't really important, had nothing to do with the plot. It was just something that was going on in the background. When we first enter Jenny's apartment, we see that this iron is upright. Now, after they've been talking, now we see it a few seconds later on its side, face down. Now, we didn't see any character touch this, and it's very unlikely that there's a poltergeist or anything like that that's affecting this. It's just a continuity error. We experience change blindness all the time in movies because these changes rarely matter. They're not that important. Let's look at one more example.
Hi, Lloyd. Been away, but now I'm back.
Good evening, Mr. Torrance. It's good to see you.
It's good to be back, Lloyd.
What'll it be, sir?
Hair of the dog that bit me.
Bourbon on the rocks.
That'll do her.
No charge to you, Mr. Torrance.
No charge?
Your money's no good here. Orders from the house.
Orders from the house.
Drink up, Mr. Torrance.
I'm the kind of man likes to know who's buying their drinks, Lloyd.
It's not a matter that concerns you, Mr. Torrance. At least not at this point.
Anything you say, Lloyd. Anything you say.
Okay, did you spot the change? If you didn't, then hey, that's another example of change blindness. But just in case you didn't, let's walk back through the scene one more time. We're at the bartender. You can see he's pouring this glass for Jack. You notice one big ice cube in this glass. We cut back to the bartender, back to Jack, and now the ice cube has apparently melted in the span of 10 seconds. Back to the bartender, and then back to Jack, and now the ice cube has reappeared in his glass. Back to the bartender one final time, and then over to Jack for this final shot, and you see that, what do you know, the ice is gone once more. So, most people don't notice this because they're too busy focusing on the dialogue between Jack and the bartender, because that's what's most important in this scene. So we experience change blindness everywhere, all the time. It's not just in movies, it's not just in television, and usually this is not a bad thing. Imagine if you notice every single change in your daily life. You'd constantly be distracted by all these changes happening. That's all that I have for this video. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.